All right. Speaking of the debt ceiling, let's move on to that part. President Biden and Speaker McCarthy to set up a meeting in person over the debt
back from his trip to Japan is set to meet with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy this afternoon after talks stalled over the weekend. The U.S. government is headed toward a catastrophic default unless the two sides can reach a deal. We're covering all the angles from Washington to Wall Street. Chief White House correspondent Mary Bruce starts us off. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, George. Well, both sides had hoped they would have a deal by now, but instead it was a weekend of on-again, off-again talks and fits and starts. They now have just 10 days to figure this out. The president and the House Speaker are set to meet here this afternoon, hoping they can jumpstart negotiations and finally strike a deal. Arriving back at the White House overnight, President Biden sounding optimistic. Talks took a
Even from a capitalist POV, student loans are an absolute burden for pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. Also, there's a uniquely American view of education in terms of ROI and not as a tool of social mobility, which is just fucking stupid. Even your doctors have to graduate with hundreds of thousands of debt when there is a shortage of doctors in this country. I know. It doesn't make sense. That's why I'm saying that, like, America is capitalism on overdrive. And, like, while it is so violent, so bloodthirsty, so exploitative to the global South, that exploitation inevitably wraps back around and, like, even harms those in the core of empire. And it is an inevitability. And everyone exists under that. It's fucked up. But there's not really much you can do about it when people don't even recognize their position. People don't recognize their class position even. People don't recognize that they are getting fucked up. Or they recognize that someone is fucking them. They just don't know who. So then they get, unjustifiably and unreasonably mad at, like, other people who are just as powerless, maybe even less powerful than they are. You know what I mean? Maybe even more powerless than they are. Like immigrants or black people, brown people, trans people, women in the workplace. It's like those are the people that are fucking responsible. It's so stupid.
A tumultuous turn over the weekend, but this morning negotiations to raise the debt limit and avoid a catastrophic default are back on. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy telling reporters his Sunday phone call with the president was productive.
I think we can solve some of these problems if he understands what we're looking at. But look, there's no agreement. We're still apart.
House Republicans are demanding steep spending cuts in exchange for raising the debt limit to pay off the nation's bills.
The Speaker has been very clear a red line is spending less money, and unless and until we're there, the rest of it is really irrelevant.
At issue, how much and where to restrict federal spending. Republicans' proposed cuts would gut Biden's agenda. The president has agreed to some reductions in spending, but is also calling for tax increases for the wealthiest Americans and corporations.
It's time for Republicans to accept that there is no bipartisan deal to be made solely on their partisan terms.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen stressing there's no time to waste, warning again that the government could run out of cash to pay its bills on June 1st.
I think that's a hard deadline.
If the U.S. defaults, it could spark a global recession. Markets will tumble. The U.S. government will be forced to halt Social Security and Medicare payments. Troops will go unpaid, and millions could lose their jobs.
Troops will go unpaid.
Now, some progressive Democrats are urging the president to invoke the 14th Amendment to go around Congress to pay off the nation's debts. President Biden says he does think he has that authority, but argues that it wouldn't solve this problem in time because it would likely be challenged and wouldn't be resolved by that June 1st deadline. The bottom line here, George, they need to reach a deal, and fast.
Mary Bruce, thanks. Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos.
Let's watch two experts debate the 14th Amendment and the debt limit. Explained! Or before that, maybe we could do Robert
Talk to me about the state of things right now. We have on-again, off-again negotiations. We have about 10 days. We have a call for Republicans to come over and sign on an effort to just get this vote passed, a clean vote passed, and we have discussions about the 14th Amendment. All of these are remarkably serious things. What's the state of play?
Ollie, it sounds complex, but it's really pretty simple. We don't negotiate about whether we pay our bills in America. We pay our bills. Democrats did this when Donald Trump was president, and now President Biden needs to pay the debt. And this is not Congress against the president. This is Congress trying to abrogate what past Congresses have done. Past Congresses that said, Pay this money. President Biden needs to pay it. We had a discharge petition saying basically President Biden pay the debt. 210 Democrats signed it on day one. 2 other Democrats are expected to sign it Monday. That gets us to 212. With one person we still have to convince. We just need 6 Republicans to sign that, and I think there's going to be growing pressure for them to do that.
Bob, I want to ask you about the constitutionality of this, because this is actually in the Constitution. It's not an abstraction. The 14th Amendment says America has to pay its debts. Even if it weren't in the Constitution, one should assume that's what you do. And a country does not pay its debts. It is in default. That's the worst kind of stuff. You have high interest rates. You have inflation. People leave your economy. But even if this went to court, your thought on this is that there are a lot of originalists, textualists on the Supreme Court. The Constitution says.
Yeah. I'm sure. Surely they will, interpret it in an originalist way. Yeah. Certainly.
Is what it says. You have to pay your debts.
The Constitution says what it has. I mean, I have my Constitution right here. I can read it to you. The validity of the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned. If you have an originalist on the Supreme Court who says we've got to go exactly by the words of the Constitution and we've got to understand where those words came from, then the president is clear. The president has a constitutional duty. He has made and taken an oath of office to follow the Constitution. And anybody who says otherwise is not paying very much attention. The economic calamity that would ensue failing to pay our bills, not honoring the full faith and credit of the United States, has never happened before because we've never had a default before. People may be confused about this, Ali. I mean, some people say, well, we've had government shutdowns before. Yes, we have. In fact, I've been through government shutdowns in my capacity as a government official. They're not pleasant. They're not nice. But this is different. A default on the debt of the United States means that the full faith and credit of the United States around the world, to all of our creditors, all the bondholders, all the people who are expecting to get Social Security checks, none of them will be safe.
Congressman, I have trouble calling this a negotiation because it's not supposed to be a debatable matter. It's akin to saying, I won't shoot you in the head if you give me a peanut butter sandwich. It's like, I would like if you don't shoot me in the head, maybe we can discuss a peanut butter sandwich. The Republicans say they're negotiating lowering spending, right? Tell me what that looks like, because there are things that they are asking for right now in order to agree to raising the debt limit.
Well, first of all, as you pointed out in your opening, there's a separate process for that, the budget process. And Democrats have said, we'll talk about it. But the issue is, a revenue problem. The reason, if you want to lower the deficits, what we ought to be doing is repealing the Trump and Bush tax cuts to the very wealthy.
True.
They won't do that. They're instead trying to hurt the poorest Americans, the most vulnerable Americans, at a time that people are hurting in the economy. And they're not willing to talk about the almost $1 trillion defense budget, which is most of the discretionary budget. We've said let's have some of the cuts there. It's really important to understand that the vast majority, I think 70% of the deficit, has been accumulated under Republican presidents, not Democratic presidents.
Bob Reich, let's talk about what happens. You said it's a very different thing. It's not a government shutdown. We know government shutdowns are bad, but a lot of Americans who say...
Yeah, they don't give a fuck, dude. There's no deficit hawking under the Republican administrations. Let's be fucking real now. Because Republican administrations are successfully cutting taxes for the wealthy. There's no deficit. There's no budget hawking. There's no deficit sharking under when ultimately the goal is to cut taxes for the wealthy. That's the whole point. You know what I mean? There's no what are you talking about? Don't even fucking bring that up. What are you, a communist? What the fuck is that shit? It's only when poor people. It's only when poor people are getting some minor benefits, some marginal benefits. That's when we got to talk about the moral hazard. That's when we got to talk about the fucking deficit. Come on now.
I've seen a couple of them. It doesn't have that much impact on my life. Talk to me about, because a default has a macro impact. It does things broadly to the economy, which will trickle down and hit people. And it does specific things to certain people as it relates to their income.
Allie, the worst thing about a default is that we don't know exactly what it would do. We know it would create chaos. We know that it would reduce and eliminate the full faith and credit of the United States, that all the global bondholders of the United States would no longer trust the United States, that America would no longer have the capacity to continue doing what we want to do. In fact, it could explode the deficit. Because, there are so many ways in which the economy would contract and collapse, and tax revenue would therefore decline and the deficit would go up. I mean, this is not just a nuclear option. This is sort of the end of time option, Armageddon option. And you don't want to do that. There's no reason to do it.
The economy is made up, so who cares? Yeah, it won't be made up when it blows up, though. That's the only problem. That's the issue, is that, you're right, the economy is made up. And unless you're saying, who cares, don't default on the debt, pay for it, raise the ceiling, or mint the coin, or whatever the fuck you have as an alternative, don't listen to fucking Congress. Yeah, you will find out that it's not fake, or at least its impact on your life is not so fucking fake when, when they don't raise the debt ceiling, which is fucking insane, by the way. I don't even know. Oh, it's the dumbest country on the planet. We're so stupid. I've avoided talking about this mostly because of how fucking stupid it is, that I just I've brought it up a lot. Like I say, when I say I've avoided talking about it, it still means I cover it fucking twice or 3 times a week, but it's still so stupid.
The fact that you don't have a single Republican in the House willing to join the Democrats in avoiding this Armageddon itself is frightening.
Ro Khanna, you had mentioned that there are 2 ways to solve money that you think is, a budget that's off, and that is you either cut spending or you increase revenue or you do both. The Republicans are proposing a bunch of things, including some work requirements on things that people...
Insane, dude. Yeah. That's the only way to do it, man.
People receive, whether it's Medicaid or food stamps or temporary financial assistance. Many of those cases already have work requirements, but the interesting thing here is that we have 3.5% unemployment in this country. We don't have a work ethic problem in this country. We have people who don't use their vacations, don't take time off, but we are leaning in.
Yeah, that's but if they were doing that, then it would be a work ethic problem. Come on, don't even bring that up. It's just I know why he's doing that, but I don't know.
To this thing that we leaned into during COVID, and we always seem to lean into, is that let's take stuff away from the least among us right now. That's a way to cut the budget.
Well, first of all, you pointed out there already are work requirements. President Clinton, to some controversy, put those requirements in the 1990s. They exist. Here's what the Republicans want to do. They want to now take away the benefits, take away food stamps, take away health care from the most vulnerable. And there's going to be 0 increase in actual employment because there have been studies that have been done that show all this is going to do is take away the benefits. And the Democrats have said it's a non-starter. Absolutely not. We're not going to allow that. And it does nothing to lower the deficit. I mean, that's a fraction of the actual budget.
Bob, you've studied this very closely, this whole idea of inequality. Ro Khanna is exactly right. It will not increase employment. It will not get what Matt Gaetz called couch potatoes off of couches, because most Americans are working. All we have is a mismatch between open jobs and people looking for work. But it will actually cause fewer people who are at the lowest end of the economic pole to get money.
Yes, and indeed, there have been 2 studies just done showing that the effect of a default would, at the minimum, be about 3 million jobs. It could be as high as 8.2 million jobs. It's not just the people at the bottom are going to be affected. Working class people, middle class people are going to be affected. A default would, in a way, I think it's not too far-fetched to say explode the economy. Now, if the president were to go along with what the Republicans want and hurt the most vulnerable members of this society, we would be turning our back on the biggest problem we have in America today, apart from democracy and preserving democracy, which is...
Are Dems trying to be alarmist so they can use the 14th Amendment? Well, one, aspect of that is, from as far as I understand, I'm not super knowledgeable of this, but once you do it one time, you can like effectively remove the debt ceiling conversation, like permanently. And then the United States of America will no longer be one of two nations that has this debt ceiling conversation. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing, which is why Democrats will never do it. Democrats are incapable of doing a good thing. They would never do that.
Widening inequality, and the fact that
the other country is Denmark, but their debt ceiling is so high that it doesn't even matter.
We have a small group of people at the top who are raking in most of the economic gains of the economy, have been doing so for years, and we have a larger and larger number of vulnerable Americans, including a lot of working class people who have voted for Donald Trump in the past because they're so frustrated and so angry and so mystified at why they're not getting ahead. Well, you can imagine what that is going to do in and of itself.
We have amongst the highest poverty rates in the developed world, amongst the highest maternal mortality rates, amongst the highest child poverty rates, amongst the highest food insecurity rates. But what are we looking at? Cutting benefits to people on Medicaid and SNAP. All right, gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. Congressman Ro and Robert.
The real lazy bones of society, you know what I mean? The real villains of society are, poor moms working at fucking Walmart, dude. Thank God someone is addressing that. Thank God for Kevin McCarthy. You know what I'm saying? Fucking legend. And the Republican Party. Here's two experts debating on it.
So let's talk to some folks who are. Joining me now for an actual debate are two of the country's top legal and constitutional minds who have competing New York Times op-eds on this topic. Lawrence Tribe is a constitutional law emeritus professor at Harvard Law School, co-author of To End a Presidency, The Power of Impeachment. He has advised multiple Democratic presidents on constitutional issues, and last week, when Joe Biden was discussing the possible use of the 14th Amendment, he name-checked Professor Tribe. In a recent New York Times essay, he writes, Mr. Biden...
Bro, you said two old white men? What are you, fucking crazy? We're talking about constitutional scholars that are talking about how the 14th Amendment could be utilized against the debt limit. Of course it's going to be two old white guys debating the issue. What do you mean? This is like the most two old white guy conversation you could get to. You know what I mean? It's the nerdiest fucking thing on the planet, dude. They were there when it was written. Yeah, they wrote it, bro. One of them wrote it. No, I'm kidding.
Must tell Congress in no uncertain terms and as soon as possible, before it's too late to avert a financial crisis, that the United States will pay all its bills as they come due. On the other side of the debate, Michael W. McConnell is a professor at Stanford Law, as well as the director for the school's Constitutional Law Center. He's also a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution and a former judge for the 10th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. His New York Times op-ed on the 14th Amendment is headlined, "The Case for Violating the Debt Limit is Dangerous Nonsense." Thank you both for joining me today. I appreciate you being here. Michael, let me start with you. You heard me make the case for using the 14th Amendment, but I'm no lawyer, although I did mention a bunch of legal experts who say the 14th Amendment is a real and viable option for avoiding a default. You, however, called it, quote, dangerous nonsense and an illegal, foolish idea. Briefly explain for our viewers why you are so against it.
Well, yes, you made a political case, but you made no legal case at all. And I think the law here is absolutely clear. The President of the United States does not have the power to borrow additional money on the credit of the United States without authorization from Congress. That is bedrock constitutional law. It comes from Article 1, Section 8, Clause 2. And the 14th Amendment has nothing whatever to do with this. The 14th Amendment does not mention the president. It does not authorize the president to do anything. And indeed, the 14th Amendment, Section 4, really has nothing to do with a debt limit crisis. What it provides is that the public debt of the United States the validity of the public debt may not be questioned. Well, even if we come to default, which I think is highly unlikely because I assume that actors here are going to negotiate a reasonable deal, but even if we did default, this would not question the validity of the public debt. When a borrower doesn't pay on time, the debt is just as valid as before. It just means that the debtor is in trouble.
So, Larry, your
dog, you're the. But like, wait, we are the ones who borrowed it though. Like, you're a part of the fucking. You live in America, dog. What do you mean? What the fuck? He's talking like he's channeling in from fucking Mars or something. Like, this is the entire global economy, okay?
Peddling an illegal, dangerous, nonsensical idea, says Michael. He says it's a political argument, not a legal argument. What is your response to him?
Well, with all respect, I think Michael is completely wrong. Section 4 of the 14th Amendment was inserted when Abraham Lincoln realized that just as we need to completely raise lots of money beyond, and he had to expand the debt of the United States 80-fold in order to put down the insurrection. After the insurrection was put down, the same forces threatened to destroy the country from within by making it difficult for us to pay our debts. So the Constitution in Section 4 of the 14th Amendment made it clear that we would always pay our debts. Of course, the president does.
Dude, conservatives are such fucking whiny losers. They were doing that after. I don't even know that that was the history of it, for the record. That is such like pathetic fucking petty loser bullshit. Like, oh, sorry, we lost, but like also we'll still use this. Like,
doesn't
fuck
have
you, man.
Unilateral power to borrow. No one said he did. But Congress has given him that power every time it passes a budget under something that Michael doesn't seem to be talking about, under the 1974 Congressional Budget Act, which was designed to prevent Nixon from refusing to spend money that Congress had told him to spend. Every time a budget is passed, it automatically sets both a floor and a ceiling. After 1974, the arbitrary ceiling that was set in 1917 really doesn't get in the way at all. There's a separate freestanding set of sections of 31 U.S. Code, Title 31, which affirmatively authorize the president to borrow money through the Treasury Department to make up the gap between the amount Congress has.
I just realized he's green screening himself in, because who the fuck would make that their background of a green screen? Like, this is so irrelevant to the point. I'm sorry.
Agreed to tax and the amount it has said he must spend. Those sections, 3102 through 3106, are in full effect. The other provision, which is a freestanding provision in section 3101 of Title 31, gets in the way, but it is a completely unconstitutional obstacle because it would make us basically deadbeats. It would make the president exercise what the Supreme Court has said he can't be given as a matter of separation of powers, and that is a line item veto. He'd have to decide which.
I think it's so funny that these dudes have studied their entire fucking lives and like know so many precedents and like study the Constitution, and we'll talk about constitutional law, and like, and ultimately it's just like whatever fucking the Republican appointed Supreme Court justices think is going to happen. It has nothing to do with like an originalist interpretation. There is no, like, all the precedent stuff is just a way to get these fucking nerds to shut the fuck up, to make it seem like they're actually operating with like a rigid belief system when there is none. It's probably my most controversial argument is that constitutional law is fucking bullshit overall, and it's not actually about a genuine a genuine interpretation of the Constitution and a difference in agreement, and that like originalism is just a intellectual patina slapped on top of a reactionary approach to like any particular matter. That's it. It's just, it's made up. It's bullshit. They literally act like there is some kind of, they act like it's rooted in intellectualism. It's not even fucking, it's not even a old way of thinking either. They came up with it like 20 fucking years ago. Okay? That's the real funny secret of it, is that like they literally made it the fuck up like not that long ago, like 35, 40 years ago maybe, maximum. Okay? And we act like it's been around since the beginning of time. Like, no, they fucking made it up. Patina means, thank you, chatter. Color, tint, shade, flavor. Exactly. They made it up because of the living, breathing document theory was too woke for them. So they had to find a counter to, like, justify it. They had to find a counter to justify the interpretation of the Constitution in like in a more rigid way. Which again, there is no originalist argument for like so many modern things. Okay, and if the Constitution was supposed to be supposed to be interpreted in that regard, then you would not be able to make amendments on it. You know what I mean? There would be no. Like, it's just so stupid. You would not be able to amend the Constitution if it wasn't a living, breathing document. Therefore, I'm telling you, 90% of, like, the constitutional law conversations revolve around just vibes-based politics. It's all married to ideological boundaries. It doesn't matter. The Supreme Court in and of itself is already a neoliberal institution. It is designed to create outcomes that are going to be beneficial for corporations and the wealthy, no matter what happens. And even on the liberal side, by the way, this is the reality. But the back and forth is really funny, especially because, like, in my opinion, and this is something that people will probably get mad at me for saying, this is just as like serious and real. Like, knowing this much about constitutional law is just as serious and real as like learning Path of Exile skill trees. Straight up. It's just a fucking hobby at that point. Okay? I know that like we all have this massive machine in the media to be like, what do you mean? We have the Institutes of Higher Learning. This is an entire field of study. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? This impacts people's lives, Hasan. It's like, no, it's no different than just like learning, I don't know, the family tree of fucking Naruto fandom or some shit. I don't know. No, it's just bullshit. It's bullshit. It's just propped up as though it's like some serious thinking going on. When Supreme Court justices, I would love to know how much Supreme Court justices have ever deviated from just the party line. When it comes down to like you know, an originalist, a serious originalist interpretation of the Constitution, like, it's bullshit.
Which debts we pay, which debts we don't. Is he going to stiff the veterans or the Social Security recipients? That is a seizure by the president of the power of the purse. So I think Michael has absolutely every part of the argument wrong. And I think I'm being a lawyer here. That's what I've done for 50 years. And I think Michael has just missed the boat completely.
Michael, deal with the arguments Larry raised there, especially the line item veto point, the idea that it's unconstitutional for a president to be picking and choosing as we become deadbeats.
So when Congress has decided to spend more money than the revenues come in, they can authorize borrowing up, and they do, up to a certain a level, but not infinite, up to a certain level, and we've reached that. If you then reach that point, The president has the obligation, I think the constitutional obligation, but certainly a responsible obligation, which every president has recognized, to prioritize spending. That's what Secretary Yellen has been doing for the last several months, is to prioritize spending. And the very statute that Professor Tribe mentions, the Impoundment Control Act of 1974, authorizes the president to defer spending through the end of the fiscal year in the case of contingencies, which obviously this is as big a contingency as you can possibly imagine, and to send a message to Congress to that effect. But in the meantime, the real answer here is that he should negotiate with Congress. Congress has the power of the purse. All this nonsense about hostage taking is ridiculous, since the Congress is the branch of government that has authority for all of this. It is all within its control, and President Biden can veto, and he has political authority. But at this point, the only responsible thing is for him to sit down and negotiate and a set of spending cuts that'll be acceptable to both sides. We aren't facing a crisis; we're just facing a political problem.
Well, I'm going to let you guys debate. I won't defend my diehard analogy, which is an illegal point to begin with.
I mean, what if they're not fucking What if their demands are insane? You know what I mean? What if their demands are insane? Like, what are you talking about? God. He's just like, let the poor fucking die. I don't understand what the big deal is, Biden. You said nothing will fundamentally change. Let the poor people die. I mean, here are some facts. GOP raised the debt ceiling 3 times under Trump. GOP raised the debt ceiling 7 times under Bush. The GOP raised the debt ceiling 18 times under Ronald Reagan. Now they're refusing to pay their taxes to ultra rich so they can try to cut veterans' health care. I mean, that last part is just like seasoning. But like, ultimately, this is what happens. It happens. He's making it seem like a political fight within Congress is not like genuinely impactful to the global economy, which is kind of stupid. I don't know. Rare Midas Touch W. Wait, Midas Touch has a lot of W's. I love unhinged liberals, dude. Are you kidding me? Here are the facts. The GOP raised the debt ceiling. 97% of U.S. debt incurred prior to Biden's presidency. 25% of all U.S. debt incurred under Trump. This is a Republican default crisis. Dude, I love the Midas Touch. They're such fucking fun liberals, dude. The Midas Touch is the closest we will get to like Bush-era liberalism in this day and age. They're the best. They like openly are unhinged. They will make the counter propaganda like where all Republicans are pedophiles. Here's why, and then it's just like a list of Republicans that have done like that have engaged in like sexual deviancy or straight up pedophilia. It's awesome. They're fucking fire. I love their shit.
As you pointed out. Let me ask you, Larry Tribe, what do you say to Michael McConnell's point that the debt will still be valid even if we default and can't pay it, so the Section 4 doesn't even apply? What's your response to that argument?
Well, if the debt is still valid, if it's still up there, then we've broken through the debt ceiling anyway. So Michael's argument defeats itself. But in terms of the people who get stiffed, whether they no longer get Medicaid or no longer can buy food or no longer get veterans benefits, it's little solace to them to be told that the debt is still theoretically valid. And the fact is that the president does have the borrowing power. It's delegated by Congress. And Michael has never answered the fact that after the 1974 process, the 1917 ceiling is no longer relevant. And of course, the president is sitting down and bargaining with Congress. But what Congress is trying to do is get through the process of threatening a default, something it couldn't get in the ordinary bargaining process. All of those things that.
Yep. You can't assume minority control over, like, you can't put a fucking gun to the head of the global economy and be like, no, from the minority position, we're going to dominate and we're going to get whatever the fuck we want. Even if no one's asking for it, by the way, because fiscal conservatism is not even popular amongst Republicans. Like, Donald Trump is literally, he got an ad recently about Ron DeSantis. What was the fucking ad? They keep saying, oh, Ron DeSantis wants to cut Social Security entitlements, Social Security benefits. That's the funniest part. Like, the main guy in the Republican Party completely eviscerated this, like, false notion within the Republican political operatives that, like, oh, no, Americans want actual cuts to entitlements and benefits. It's like, no, that's not real. It's not real because Americans are broke as fuck, dog. They don't have $5 to avoid the top of the hour ad break. Which, of course, is a problem because there's a 3-minute ad at the top of the hour. Now, fear not, though. If you don't have the $5, well, you can use a Twitch Prime. You can get that by connecting your or someone else's Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account where you get 1 free Prime subscription a month. You can also get gifted a sub if you're lucky. Preston for the win. And Blast is safe. Thank you for the 5. Get the subs, allowing 10 people to no longer see the ads at the top of the hour. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. That was fucking such a good segue. Jesus Christ, I'm popping.
Congress would love to have, or at least Mitch McConnell would love to have, because otherwise he loses his speakership. People like Marjorie Taylor Greene on the other side, those are things they can't get through the ordinary bargaining process. So what they're doing is saying, unless you give it to us this way and threaten the good credit of the United States, we're not going to budge. That is illegitimate.
Hence my hostage-taking analogy. Michael, do you want to respond to Larry there?
Professor Tribe, it is just completely unfounded to say that the 1917 law is set aside by the Impoundment Control Act. The Impoundment Control Act says nothing about it. And the 1917 law, all it did was move from a system where Congress had to authorize each and every individual bond issue, which in those days were for particular purposes, and instead they substituted a system where Congress would authorize bonds up to a certain level, that's the debt ceiling, and then the Treasury would be able to use those funds for whatever it wanted. And what's being set aside here is not the 1917 Act, it's that the president cannot borrow without authorization from Congress.
So
and he has that authorization.
And there's nothing unconstitutional.
The funniest part about it is that I don't give a fuck about this text. I just don't care. And I don't think any American cares. The only people that actually care about this on either side of the issue are these guys. Like, nobody fucking will be like, oh, man, you mean to tell me that, like, a piece of paper has decided that it's actually a big no-no, but maybe the piece of paper also has other pieces of paper that says it's a big yes? Oh, man. Well, I guess we got to let the fucking government burn, dude. Guess we got to fucking implode the global economy. Fuck it. Like, ask a fucking stevedore. Ask a plumber in Minnesota. Like, hey, man, should America, default on its debt and go into financial collapse? Like implement global financial collapse. But Biden has something that he could do in this circumstance. Which one do you prefer? Just, default on the debt and everything implodes? Or do you think that we shouldn't do that? Like, who's going to go along with the no, financial implosion is a necessity? Like, no one is a fucking rugged Austrian School of Economics Andy when death is knocking down their door, okay? Ayn Rand herself was a recipient of Social Security. So suck my fucking dick, okay? Nobody talks about like, oh man, yeah, let it burn, let it crash and burn. We'll learn our lesson, like whatever the fucking lesson may be, by the way. There is no lesson to be learned there. No. It doesn't work that way. No one wants that when it's actually going to hurt them.
About that. That's absolute. That's right in there in clause 2 of Article 1, Section 8.
Michael, can I suggest you go to the library, Michael? I think they've got a good one at Stanford. You've got everything wrong.
Michael, can I ask before I bring Larry back in?
A single mistake.
Before I bring Larry back in, Michael, let me ask you this. On a practical level, what about the issue of standing, of who's going to be able to actually sue Biden in court over use of the 14th Amendment? University of Virginia law professor Sai Krishna Prakash said to Politico, quote, in our system, something can be illegal, but it doesn't follow that you can go to court or get a remedy for it. Doesn't that help Joe Biden, regardless of what you think of the legal merits of the argument?
Well, I don't think this is ever going to get to court because if the Treasury were to issue bonds on the unilateral authority of the president and not the full faith and credit of the United States, investors would be so spooked by that they certainly wouldn't buy those bonds without demanding an extraordinary.
What? Bullshit! Bro, how are you? Wait, what? First of all, the exact opposite is true. If the U.S. defaults on its debt, it's way worse for confidence. That's so fucking dumb. What a take. Am I crazy? I mean, he knows more than I do. Like, I'm an idiot, okay? But, like, if we are looking at, like, market confidence, banks are infinitely more confident in purchasing exactly what he's talking about here than the other way around, where the U.S. defaults on its debt. What?
Ordinary risk premium. And that's even clear from the 14th Amendment, Section 4, which provides it's only the public debt which is authorized by law, which is to say by Congress.
Dude, no one gives a fuck. Dude, this implies that, like, I'm thinking, like, this implies that, like, what? These big retail banks are going to be like, man, I love constitutional law, and this strikes me as unconstitutional. I think we can't purchase these, actually. It seems like this would be a step in the wrong direction. Like, what kind of fucking take is this? I don't even understand. Like, every aspect of the American Treasury, the Fed, the American form of governance, and even market confidence in the dollar revolves around one thing. And that's not like whether the president is demented or not. Okay, clearly, because if that was the case, we'd be fucked. It is about the American military, okay? It's about how far our boom boom can go. So that reality doesn't change if the president decides to do something that is like unprecedented, but legal.
Which is sacrosanct under the 14th Amendment. A bond that the president just sells on his own say-so is a piece of paper.
Okay, we're out of time. I've got to ask last question to Larry Tribe. I've got to ask, in 2011, you actually came out against Barack Obama, your former student at law school, and you told him not to invoke the 14th Amendment in the debt ceiling showdown. You warned that the argument had, quote, no logical stopping point, that it was unpersuasive, and you suggested the 14th Amendment, using it would leave little room to stop the president from taking over other powers as well. How would you argue against yourself today, Larry Tribe?
Well, I did in the New York Times. The matter seems much clearer to me now that I have spent another number of years studying the detailed structure of the budget process. I was wrong. I made a mistake. I'm right now, and I don't think there's any political change in complexion. I was very much in favor of Obama. I'm in favor of Biden. But on the question of whether it can get to court, it's in court now. 75,000 federal workers who are threatened with losing their jobs because some people are listening to arguments like Michael McConnell's, have brought a lawsuit against the president and against the Secretary of the Treasury in federal district court in Boston, saying that unless the president makes clear that he will spend what Congress has authorized him to spend in passing the budgets that caused us to go over the ceiling, that unless he says that, they're going to lose their jobs because the federal agencies are no longer assured that they can pay them. So whether we like it or not, it's in court.
It's in court. We will see what happens. We will also see what happens politically. Lawrence Tribe, Michael McConnell, appreciate you both taking time out to come and have an actual debate on the show. Thank you both.
I didn't learn shit from this dog. I'm not going to lie. I feel like this probably was more informative by Mehdi Hasan, like when he's describing
over and over. The United States doesn't negotiate with terrorists. You can't give in to hostage takers because you can't trust them or their demands. Like Hans Gruber, the bad guy in Die Hard, who uses his leverage to make serious-sounding demands of the police and buy time for his real plot to steal money.
The following people are to be released from their captors. In Northern Ireland, the 7 members of the New Provo Front. In Canada, the 5 imprisoned leaders of Liberté de Québec. In Sri Lanka, the 9 members of the Asian Dawn movement. I read about them in Time magazine.
Do you think they'll even try to do it?
Who cares?
It's funny, and it's the fictional trope that gets at a real-life truth. It is dangerous to negotiate with hostage takers, and that's never truer than when the hostage is the entire United States economy. Yes, I'm talking about House Republicans' refusal to raise the debt ceiling, their willingness to engineer a global crisis where there currently is none.
I've never watched Die Hard.
You see, the government has to borrow money to pay for spending that's already been approved by Congress. Now those bills are coming due, and unless Congress lifts the debt limit, the government...
I'm watching Heat right now, and by saying I'm watching it right now, I mean, like, it's taken me multiple days to finish it. It's like fucking 4 hours, dude. Kind of crazy.
Can't borrow more money to pay them back. The Republicans are insisting on deep spending cuts before any bills are paid. And the fear is that if the White House doesn't capitulate by June, the United States, the world's biggest economy, home to the world's reserve currency, will be forced by the GOP to default on its debt for the first time, torching our own economy and the global economy in the process. Look, Joe Biden knows this is a shakedown. He saw this as vice president when the GOP first used the debt limit as a weapon against President Obama, resulting in across-the-board spending cuts that became a nightmare for everyone, including even Republicans. So it's no wonder Biden has told us for months that extending the debt limit and preserving the full faith and credit of the United States was not up for negotiation.
Happy to meet with McCarthy, but not on whether or not the debt limit gets extended. That's not negotiable.
The White House has said absolutely not. They will not negotiate raising the national debt limit.
No brinksmanship. No hostage taking.
The president has been very clear. He's not going to negotiate over avoiding default.
So, now as the zero...
I think you should call the Republicans terrorists. That'd be fire. I will not negotiate with terrorists, Jack.
Hour for a U.S. default approaches. Do you want to guess what the White House is doing? They're negotiating.
It's never as good to characterize a negotiation in the middle of a negotiation. I remain optimistic because I'm a congenital optimist, but I really think there's a desire on their part as well as ours to reach agreement.
And what are they negotiating on? Well, here are some of the GOP demands. Put a cap on all federal spending across the board for a decade. Make food stamp recipients satisfy additional work requirements. Slash the IRS budget. End all pandemic stimulus plans. End student debt forgiveness. And, of course, make it easier to drill for oil. In fact, the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities says the House GOP plan would take hundreds of billions of dollars from the neediest Americans while giving a similar windfall to tax cheats. And Kevin McCarthy and company are being egged on in their hostage-taking by one Donald John Trump.
I say to the Republicans out there, congressmen, senators, if they...
I think it's crazy that, like, the people who champion the Republican Party are those who, like, also will be hurt by this. Like, obviously, As far as the super wealthy, like, yeah, they side with the Republican Party more, statistically speaking. But there's not enough super wealthy people in the country to, like, actually vote for one party and, like, swing the votes. There are significantly more poor people in the country. So even within the Republican Party's base of voters, obviously there are far more broke boys that are literally still voting for their own demise.
They don't give you massive cuts. You're going to have to do a default.
Pretty scary. Even scarier when you think back to what...
But, you know, remind yourselves of the poll that we looked at, which was 57%, according to a YouGov poll, of Republicans are on what they were looking for. The most important thing that they were looking for in a Republican presidential candidate was owning the libs. 57%, that's all they care about. 66% say no changes, resist any changes to the Second Amendment, no gun control whatsoever. So that's where we're at.
What he said when he was president, and Congress raised the debt ceiling for him 3 times.
Hopefully we're in good shape on the debt ceiling. I can't imagine anybody ever even thinking of using the debt ceiling as a negotiating wedge.
Now do you see how the GOP stands for nothing in this debate? The only aim is to weaken the Biden White House. In fact, Trump said it himself on CNN that defaulting on the debt doesn't matter anymore because he's not president anymore. Our collective economic future be damned. But if Biden were to reject these Republican negotiations, to refuse the hostage takers' terms, what's his alternative? Well, I've told you about one weapon he has on his side here on this show before. Joe Biden has the 14th Amendment on his side. Yes, the post-Civil War Reconstruction Amendment that gave citizenship to freed slaves, but it also contained a provision, Section 4, saying the validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law shall not be questioned. You see, after the Civil War, many in the South resented paying taxes to cover debts from a war they lost. And Congress didn't want a future administration to start reneging on those debts because of personal resentments. Advocates say that clause, authored 6 decades before the debt ceiling even became a law, means it's unconstitutional for the U.S. to default. And in 1935, the Supreme Court ruled that the public debt clause does have a broader meaning beyond paying off Civil War debt. Some even argued that to this day, the president is duty-bound by that amendment to avoid default and to borrow more money to meet his constitutional obligation, no matter what a single act of Congress says. In fact, a group of 11 Senate Democrats, including Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, are now circulating a letter demanding Biden invoke the 14th Amendment. As Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley put it, I want the president to see that he has the support in the Senate to use the 14th Amendment. He has support to say no to outrageous demands from the radical right that's trying to terrorize American families. So, last week, many on the left were excited to hear President Biden say this.
You said you're certain there won't be default. Are you willing to take unilateral action, like invoking the 14th Amendment, to make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, the question, I have been considering the 14th Amendment.
That sounded encouraging, but everyone missed what he said next.
Saying they're terrorizing is not the same as calling them terrorists. I've long been a fan of calling the Republican Party terrorists, as you guys know. The most successful terrorists, both globally and even on domestic terrorism. Straight up.
The problem is it would have to be litigated. And in the meantime, without an extension, it would still end up in the same place. I'll be very blunt with you.
Why don't the Democrats just call their bluff? There's no way Republicans let it default, right? What? No, No. No. They will do that. You can't, dude, bro, it's like having a pit bull drive your car, okay? You leave the Republicans in control, they will do the most insane shit, especially when a Democrat is the one who's going to inevitably suffer the backlash, dude. Are you fucking crazy? Because no one will recognize it. Their donors will not allow it. I don't think that, I don't know. No. Ultimately, I think economic crises will create ample opportunity for the donors to figure out a way to take advantage.
When we get by this, I'm thinking about taking a look at months down the road as to see whether what the court would say about whether or not it does work.
So the U.S. runs out of money halfway through the year, and the opposition is asking for a decline in spending, and suddenly this is a problem? Wait, what? Why is Steve's spending cuts something wrong? Can't be serious, right? There is 0% chance. Thoughts on the theater being destroyed? Apparently, the Russians gave a warning 3 days ago from what I've read, but not too sure. NATO too. China was close to joining Russia in a veto, but changed position when U.S. watered down resolution text. Oh my God, it's a NATO Andy. No, this guy, first of all, we just went over it, so I don't know why the fuck this person, like, this is my least favorite kind of chatter who, like, comes in here and is, like, so fucking smarmy. Like, what do you think I've been doing for the past hour, you fucking asshole? This is precisely what we covered. Go back and watch the VOD, okay? If most countries don't have a debt ceiling, why don't they just abolish it? Just trying to learn. Thanks, brother. Because that would imply that, like, you're doing something. And Democrats hate doing anything. That's it. Collab. What? I'm lucky to have gotten the chance to attend a game. Heat versus Celtics in Miami last night, and to hang out and have great conversation with Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner. This was my first time at a live basketball game. Energy was wild. Thank you for this amazing experience. Wait, what the fuck? Bro, look at his hand placement. Weren't you supposed to be on his pod? Yeah, he's asked me to be on it before, but I just don't know. Like, I'm not going to go to Austin. You know what I mean? Oh, shit. He unfollowed me, I guess. Why not? Because it's so far. Drama. Yeah, well, he's acting different now. I thought he only talked to interesting and relevant people. Fucking got him, dude. You fucking got me. What does that say about you that you're watching an uninteresting and irrelevant person? Like, doesn't that kind of own you more? You've subscribed for 2 months to an uninteresting and irrelevant person. Let's finish the GOP debt.
But as crooked media's Brian Beutler pointed out, that's Biden essentially saying the 14th Amendment might be for the next time Republicans try to shake me down. Can't do it now. Got to know what the courts would say first. But here's the thing. The Supreme Court doesn't do advisory opinions ahead of time. You have to test it out. And here's a question. If Biden invoked the 14th, who would stop him? Who would sue him? Who has standing to take him to court? Is Kevin McCarthy really going to tell the Supreme Court that he's suffering irreparable harm because the president is paying America's bills that Congress already authorized? And as far-right and seemingly corrupt as the Trump-stacked Supreme Court is, do you really think they're ready to rule against the U.S. paying its bills to send America into a major default for the first time in its history?
Maybe.
Do Clarence Thomas and...
Maybe. I could see that. Dude, they could just, like, have fun with it. I could see them trying to have fun with it. Am I crazy? I don't know. I also... Listen. All I'm going to say is this. Abortion. Because, let's be real... Like, Roe v. Wade, the decision was 1,000,000% bad for the Republican Party's future prospects. And they still did it. This hurts capital, though. Yeah, I guess abortion doesn't have like a direct it doesn't inflict direct amounts of pain. It still does, but not the same not to the same degree. But what I was thinking is just like when there's a will, there's a way. I feel like when there's times of economic uncertainty, the Republicans or business owners will figure out a way to fucking make money off of it. Finance America doesn't take into account how dendrologists feel about this country. Sigh, what?
Samuel Alito really want to be responsible for 6 million jobs lost and $15 trillion of wealth wiped out in America alone? As Politico points out, the court's current approach to most cases is overwhelmingly pro-market and business-friendly. The justices would be wary of stoking economic calamity. At the end of the day, not even Harlan Crow, Clarence Thomas's billionaire benefactor, very dear friend, not even Harlan Crow wants treasury bonds and stock markets to crash. He wants to stay a billionaire. And again, it's not just that this court is pro-market. After Harlan Crow, after the Dobbs backlash, after becoming the most unpopular Supreme Court since Gallup began asking the question more than 50 years ago, they're really going to immortalize themselves as the court that drove America and the world into a historic depression? Really? So, why doesn't Joe Biden simply take a page out of the Die Hard playbook and go yippee-ki-yay on their debt-ceiling hostage takers? Why not invoke his 14th Amendment power to meet America's legal and constitutional obligations on the debt and prevent a new Great Recession in the process?
Let's do it, Dark Brandon. Pull it up. Oh my God. A Democracy Now! Video has 500,000 views. That made me so happy. That's fucking sick, dude. That's awesome. I love Amy. My queen. My real queen. Everybody's like, oh, Dua Lipa. Oh my God, she's tweaking. Dua Lipa is not my queen in the same way that Amy is.